Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Whiskey Diaries. I'm going to be your host Martin Lang, and we're at Death and Taxes. Today we're going to go through best whiskies of 18-year-old under $200. The reason why we say $200 is because nowadays, because the whiskey boom in the last 5 to 10 years, there's a lot of whiskies out there that maybe 5-6 years ago were about under $200, but now they're like something crazy like $300, $400, $500, $600. Like Yamasaki 18, I remember buying it for $180 like 6-7 years ago, and now it goes for a whooping $600, $700. You can even find it for like $900 online. But I believe that $200 is that sweet price range for 18-year-olds in which you can find really good whiskies. I reckon around $150 to $200 is definitely worth good value for money for the whiskies. The first one that we're going to try is the GlenDronach 18-year-old. This is 100% sherry. We already mentioned GlenDronach in one of our videos before, so I'm not going to go too much on the distillery itself. I'm just going to touch a little bit on why 18-year-old, and the older the whiskey gets, the more expensive it gets. It's not about the time, it's actually about the fact that every year whiskey stays in a barrel, about 2% actually evaporates, because obviously ABV and alcohol evaporates faster than water. So during summer times and during winter time, where the cask is going from cold to warm, from warm to cold, and you breathe this, you're actually losing a lot of the alcohol. So basically, by the time you get to 18-year-old, a lot of the whiskey will have been evaporated. So that means that obviously the quantity that is on the barrels initially is a lot less, especially once you start getting to the 25-year-old mark, 30-year-old mark. Sometimes it's almost like a 30% of the cask is gone. So that brings actually the price up. Also as well, as I said before, the time, the whiskey in itself absorbs a lot of the wood, and it's really hard. You think, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put it on the barrel and just wait and forget about it. It's not that easy. A lot of the whiskeys, every barrel is its own entity, and every barrel will be aged completely different to the next one, and you can put it in the same space in the warehouse next to each other, exactly the same position, and the two whiskies in the same barrel will be completely different. So it's up to the master distiller and the master blender to actually find that whiskey and just make sure when it's ready and when it's not. Sometimes on some blends or 18-year-old whiskies, they actually are older whiskies that they put in the barrel. By law in Scotland, the age on the bottle has to be the youngest whiskey that is actually in the bottle, but sometimes you can make a blend between 18 to 21, 22 years old just to bring that characteristics and what they want actually from the whiskey flavors. So again, GlenDronach is a space out whiskey. This 18-year-old goes for $170, $180 online. Or Dan Murphy's. This is a very particular edition as well, because GlenDronach in the last 5 years as well has become really popular. So this one actually comes to Australia by allocation only. So sometimes you find it, sometimes it's completely sold out and you have to wait for the next allocation. So that's a GlenDronach 18-year-old. Now the next one is a quite common one, and this one will guarantee you that you will be able to find it in most bottle shops. Glenlivet has been making whiskey for hundreds of years. It's an actually beautiful whiskey, and again, this one as well goes for $150 to $170, depending on what bottle shop you go to. Stunning whiskey. This is only 43% alcohol. This one is 46 as well. And then this gets aged a second maturation in sherry casks as well. So you got mainly bourbon, and then they do a second maturation in sherry. Now, I couldn't find any information online exactly how much time in each barrel, but I know that they do a sherry finishes 100%. I don't know exactly what sherry is, so if you want to comment on the comments or let us know, we will happy to learn what type of barrels. The third whiskey that we're going to do is the Glenfiddich 18. Again, another one of Speyside. This is in Dufftown as well, very close to Glenlivet Distillery. They're probably about maybe a couple of kilometers away from each other. Been to both distilleries. The beautiful thing about the Glenfiddich in particular is that they make their own barrels, as I said before, with Balvenie, because Balvenie owns Glenfiddich and Balvenie are owned by the same company, William Grant's. So they have their own cooperage at the distillery. So they get the barrels from wherever they get it in America, American oak in this case, and they rebuild it just to fit and just to do whatever they want with this whiskey in particular. This is 40% for the Australian market. Beautiful whiskey as well, 18-year-old, aged in American oak. The third or the fourth one that we're going to try is a little bit more off-center. This is not very well known. Nowadays, you can probably find it in most bottle shop, but Arran hasn't been popular in Australia until like 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's starting to pick up a lot more. It was quite an unknown distillery. It's in the island of Arran in Scotland, and they started producing this 18-year-old since 2015. This one is 100% American oak again, and it's a very particular 18-year-old. Just the smell and everything is just a little bit more lighter than other whiskies than other 18-year-old whiskies. And I say lighter is because 18-year-olds usually, once you start getting to that age, between 18 to 20, 21, you start to really get the tannins from the wood and just a lot more complexity coming through. This doesn't taste exactly like a full 18-year-old. It tastes a little bit younger for my palate anyway. Still a great whiskey and very, very particular. You get a lot of iodine, a lot of salt coming from the island. It's a very, very tiny island, and bottled at 46% alcohol as well. Has a quite a kick. It's actually really, really interesting whiskey if you want to try something new. The next one, a really, really excellent whiskey, one of probably the best ones out of the Talisker range, the 18-year-old, and for the price you can't go wrong as well. Only 150, 160 for a distillery that is so well renowned as Talisker. 100% American oak, and it's just what the famous phrase for Talisker is made by the sea, and it is actually 100% accurate. The distillery is actually literally facing the ocean, very similar to what I would say with Lagavulin and Laphroaig, but Talisker is very, very famous for its smokiness and iodine and really salty and maritime flavors, and yeah, it's a cracking of a whiskey for the price. Okay, and then finally the last whiskey is Caol 18-year-old. Caol produces, the core range is actually all the whiskies are pitted. So you got the 12, you got the 18, you got the Distiller's Edition. All of them are actually pitted whiskies. I would say that the pit levels on that one are between a Bowmore and Lagavulin. It's kind of like in that middle range. Bowmore being the less pitted, and Caol there like a little bit more, and then obviously Lagavulin or Laphroaig being extra pitted. Caol produces a lot of whiskey. It's one of the biggest distilleries in Ireland, and they produce basically it's all computerized. There's only maybe like 1 or 2 people working in the distillery, and it's absolutely huge. The reason why is that a lot of the whiskies that they produce go to the blended whiskies from Johnny Walker in the Diageo range. They also produce something very interesting that is an unpitted style of whiskey. In this case, we're going to talk about the 18-year-old unpitted. Now, the reason why I picked this whiskey in particular is also just to talk a little bit of what chill filtration means in the whiskey industry. In the 70s and the 80s, when whiskey started to be really pushed and really marketed, people were finding that if you have an unchilled filter, so a non-chill filtered whiskey, when you put ice on it, sometimes it tends to go a little bit cloudy, and people didn't understand that that's just natural oils and it doesn't do anything to the whiskey, but they didn't like the effect. So a lot of major companies started to chill filter the whiskey. What chill filter means is that they freeze the whiskey to a certain temperature just to get rid of all the oils, and that makes the whiskey actually go cloudy. This is something called the Luge process that it happens with, if you ever seen Sambuca or Pernod Ricard or anything like that, or absinthe for that matter, as soon as you put something cold, those oils contracts and then actually makes the liquid go cloudy. Sometimes whiskeys can actually have that effect as well. So people didn't respond well to that, so they started filtering the whiskey just to make sure that as soon as you put ice, the whiskey will stay as clear as possible. Now this Caol 18-year-old is this non-chill filter in the whiskey, so that means that it's just basically straight out of the barrel, and it sits at 59.8% alcohol. For an 18-year-old whiskey, 59% alcohol is a lot. So as you can see as well, the color of this compared to these whiskies is a lot lighter. That means that it's just it gets aged 100% in American oak, but the American oak has been used in previous barrels, so it's a second fill or third fill. So it's actually really grassy and really strong. Has a lot of really young aromas that you don't really think or associate with something that is 18-year-old. If I put this in a blind tasting, comparing it to other 18-year-olds, you wouldn't even pick it. You'd probably say that it's almost like a 13 or a 14-year-old. So that would be it for our 18-year-old whiskies under $200. I would really recommend just to do a little bit more research by yourselves, but this is what we recommend here. And if you come to Death and Taxes and you ask to any of bartenders, or including myself, what whiskey to recommend, these ones are usually the ones that I have first picked. There's obviously a lot of 18-year-olds in the markets that we're missing, so Aberlour, and then another few others, like even GlenDronach, or Glenfarclas and other ones, but these ones is the ones that we decided to pick on. So anyway, hope you enjoy. We'll see you next time, and Slàinte mhath. Oh, delicious. Thank you.